Welcome to Indie Music Podcast, episode 306, discussion of MidSide Processing techniques. Indie Music Podcast now has a Patreon at patreon.com/indie_musiccast. And we invite you to become a member for exclusive benefits. For next to nothing per month, you can get members-only podcast video, early access to upcoming episodes, merch, and more. This morning, Matt and I get together for coffee and discuss some techniques around using MidSide processing in your signal chain. A little bit about what MidSide actually is and approaches for using it for your stereo image. Enjoy the show.
Morning,
hey, good
Doug.
morning. That took a lot of effort to get here this morning.
Sounds like my yesterday when I had to update my system, and boy, it took a lot longer than I expected to restart. How's it going?
Good.
Haven't talked to you much this week. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I just kind of I don't know. I've been focused on some certain things and didn't have RAM available for everything that was going on. So
I know the feeling. Yeah, there's only so much one can handle at a time.
Yeah,
or for a period of time, rather.
And social's usually the first thing to like get thrown off to the side, and and then my notifications were off the wall, and I was like, so I got to get away from my phone, so I just put my phone away, and I was just kind of in focus mode this week. There was just a lot going on that I
hear you.
But
make sure you give your team a heads up so we don't think something bad has happened.
Oh yeah, well, I appreciate your worry.
So things are okay.
Yeah. Now? So what's up, my fellow content creator?
What is up? Oh, I don't know. It was just it was kind of a scattered week for me here, and just wrapping up some loose ends on some projects and looking forward to kind of a reboot. I can't believe we're almost 2 weeks away from March already. It's kind of hard to wrap my head around. Like, I feel like January took so long. January was like a year long.
Yeah.
And then February is like, it feels like it's already almost gone. I don't understand what's going on here, but
yeah, it's almost springtime.
Well, it's spring here. I mean, we got irises coming up. We got daffodils. Oh, wow. The calla lilies are starting to bloom. I mean, I mowed the lawn for the first time yesterday. I mean, it didn't fully need it, but patches of it really were too high. I don't understand why it's all patchy, but part of it was like 6 inches tall and the rest of it was not. But yeah, first I was glad the lawnmower started. So yeah, it feels like spring here. I'm sure it's not quite sunny and 70 where you are.
Oh no, it's snowing, and it's really, really cold out.
Snowing. Wow.
Snowing. Gonna make chili today. And do the Super Bowl thing.
Oh yeah. Are you going to put your chili into a Super Bowl?
Probably the very Super Bowl. But no, that was really bad.
You gotta expect that. It's early. So what are we talking about today, Doug?
Oh, I don't know. I was kind of thinking about, and I didn't have time to set up, but there's something that I think is really cool, and it's if you have an audio processor that has MidSide capability on it,
mm-hmm.
and it has MidSide queuing. It's not so much I want to talk about MidSide in and of itself, but it's the technique of using MidSide queuing to help you isolate and EQ the material that you're working on. It's just, I'm sure you've done it, but I wonder if you've really paid attention to how powerful it is.
When you say MidSide queuing, I feel like you're saying you're making something wait for something else. Or are you talking about EQ?
No, talking about queuing. So where you're actually queuing the mid or queuing the side. So that's all you're hearing.
Yeah.
And So in a quick summary, before I even talk about it, is to go through an EQ and stereo and left and right before going into mid. This is kind of the way I think of it. You can do it however you want, but I like to just play the material in native stereo and do an EQ pass on it. And then I like to go ahead and flip it over into MidSide and just kind of listen to what's going on, maybe make a few tweaks. But then I use the MidSide queuing, which then isolates either the mid or the side. So I can.
I see what you're saying.
So then I'll isolate the mid, and I'll EQ the mid completely separate because I'm not even hearing the sides at that point. I'm only hearing the mid. And then I'll isolate the sides separate of the mid, and I'll EQ the sides independently. And then I bring all that back together, and you'd be amazed at how different that is if you like did a bounce before you did that process, and the difference in your EQing. Because you bring that back together and you basically sum those differences back in when you enable both MidSide.
Right.
You're no longer in queuing mode. And I just have had really good results doing that. And I thought I wanted to kind of just share that. If you haven't tried that before, you probably have the tools. I do it in the analog domain, but digital tools will do this too. And any EQ that's got MidSide processing, and this isn't just for EQ either, so it could be for compression or something along those lines too. So, but anyway, that's been a really powerful processing technique for me.
I feel like I want to define terms. I know we've talked about MidSide processing in the past, but because people can always come to this out of order. So the standard way of thinking about music is in a stereo field where you have left and right. Just backwards. This is my right. This is my left. You have a left signal and right signal, and they're brought together into a stereo pair, which is your 2-track. And then MidSide is a different way of thinking about it, where you have all your mono information as your mid, and then the sides is anything that's different from your mono information. And it's a completely way of doing it. And one technique to get better balance and good stereo with is to EQ your mid and your sides such that the mid information is a little more high and a little more spread, and the mid information is more your mono stuff is more your kick, your snare, and everything. And if you EQ them separately, you can get both a more focused middle and a more spread side with not so much effort. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, there's it's not immediately. This is something that I actually need to reference, but the mid is, I think the mid is actually like the sum of either the left or the right in the middle, and the side is like the difference of the right and the middle, or something like that. I'm actually trying to look it up here.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a little hard to. It's more hard to explain than it is to show, unfortunately. But what happens is when you sum your stereo pair to mono, there's a lot of stuff that's basically duplicated in the sides in a stereo pair, and the stuff that's in the middle is stuff that's present in both left and right channels. And so when you EQ them as mid and side rather than as a stereo pair, you can isolate the mono information in the middle from the side, from the stuff that's different than the mono information. And that's how what you perceive as the width basically is the side portion. And a lot of plugins now have added MS or MidSide processing that weren't available, even if they're a hardware emulation, that basically weren't available in the original hardware. MidSide has become a thing in the last few or several years to start adding that to a feature to even plugins that are emulations of hardware where it didn't exist in the original hardware, because that's the way that people like to work, or they like to give that as an option now, to do mid-side processing in EQs, and as you say, also in compressors. And there are some plugins, even free ones, that will allow you to do mid-side processing just by itself. I think Voxengo has a MSED free plugin that allows you to do mid-side processing, and that's a free plugin. They have some good stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation. So, other than, I'm not exactly sure of what the mathematical calculations of determining mid-side is without going. I think the guy's name was like Alan Blumenshine or something like that, who was the creator of mid-side. And this was actually back in the 50s or something like that, with the development of stereo. So this is related to the originations of stereo, and before any of our digital tools, it's a recording technique to actually create a mid-side recorded audio, which involves the use of two different microphones, and one being like a figure-8 polar pattern mic, and the other one being a like a cardioid, and one of them facing forward like the cardioid, and then the polar 8 pointing out to the side, so that polar 8 microphone would be capturing your side signals, with the cardioid right up the middle capturing your mid signals. So, and then in the mix they combine those, and then had individual control over that stereo field. So that's kind of the premise of what, in an actual recording. In digital, it's actually emulating that. It's kind of deconstructing the signal and finding things that are in the sides and signal that's up the middle, and then making it so that you can then manipulate the mids and sides through a digital process. Because you often probably don't have mid-side recorded audio, where it's just simply recorded with regular mics and panned and done conventionally in your, in the mix. So
I want to say that it's they basically, for the mathematical version, the digital version, they basically decide the difference between what's in the left and right channel equally is the middle, and then what's different, the delta, is the sides. I think that's how they do it, as a simplification anyway.
So anyway, with that, and being able to have that differentiation between your mids and sides allows you to isolate them and then work on them separately. So it's kind of nice, especially in mastering, because it gives you that a bit more surgical detail to work with, and it's very, mid-side's a subtle thing, and if you find yourself that really making large changes in the mastering context, then it may not be going well for you. But
I agree. So it should be fixed in the mixed before.
Yeah. But it's so nice when it with the subtle changes and things that come together, and how the mix just sort of blooms when you bring this together, and because when you're EQing the entire signal, and don't take into consideration that you've got differences, and so you've got maybe a lot more low end in your mids than you do your sides, and if you're EQing a lot of information that's touching the bottom end of your sides, then you may not be doing it justice, So anyway, I wanted to share that as a technique to consider in your mixes or your masters, as to take a look at the tools that you have and see if they've got the functionality for you to be able to cue out mid or side and then work on them independently, because it's really nice. And on my analog piece, I just have a toggle switch, and I can cue either side, and I work on them independently. And then when I bring them back, and I can actually A/B mid to side and then back to full mix, which is really, I think it's really powerful.
That is cool. I can see how for me, I've used it more, as you say, in a mastering context, because let's say I'm working on a mix and I have you know, 30 tracks, and like maybe 4 of those are guitars and they're spread wide, and I can EQ each one of those guitar tracks individually. I can affect the low end, I can affect the middles and the high end. But once you're down to a 2-track, like in a mastering context, and all you have is a stereo pair basically, then mid-side processing really kind of gives you more fine control over elements that you can't pick apart so easily because you don't have the individual tracks anymore. But you can use it to work on width and bottom end, the low end information separately, without really, as you say, affecting, for instance, say maybe the spread guitars. If you change it from mid to side instead of working on it as a stereo pair, then you can work on the low end without so much affecting what's wide, say in your guitars track, but you don't have the guitar track to work on those individually. So I think that is a good example of when it becomes powerful to use the mid-side processing as opposed to working on stereo EQ. Are you still looking something up?
Yeah. I was trying to bring up something in my session recall, and without giving away session information, where I could show my analog piece.
I was trying to cover for you by continuing to talk.
My machine is running like so freaking slow. It's it's not letting me load up.
Is it doing a backup or something? Sometimes they start doing stuff.
Maybe it wants me to create a new session. I don't know what the heck. Yeah, anyway, I was going to screen share here in the video, but it's not working out.
So were you working on something this week that made you think that was something you wanted to talk about, or did you have something specific that you wanted to impart? I'm just curious.
No, it's kind of something that I always do. And I just thought that it was kind of a cool thing that I wanted to share. If I hadn't already, I don't recall, but as a neat technique that I think improves the work that I do. And I thought it might be useful to others if, and obviously we're not covering details here. So if you have questions, hit us up, in our social channels or on Patreon, and, we can get into a deeper dive on it.
I'd be curious because I want to hear whether people are using it and how they're using it, or whether it's new to them, and just kind of, it'll be a really great kind of jumping off point for an actual discussion with people who are out in the field, working on their own mixes and masters and what they're doing with this kind of stuff. Yeah.
So you got a nugget to share?
Do I have a nugget to share? I do have a nugget to share about mid-side processing. I do tend to, because
no, not about mid-side, about anything. Yeah.
About anything?
Yeah. 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 You had 12 hours to prepare. Come on.
Yeah. And that 12 hours. No, I've been trying to get my business taxes.
So we got this tip prepared on opening a bourbon bottle, you see. And
the tip is to buy bottled and bond, which has specific characteristics. It has to be 100 proof. It has to be, bottled under the watchful eye of somebody who's an inspector. And I've never met a bottled and bond bourbon that I didn't like. That's always like the better stuff. Even the lower stuff. Old Granddad, Evan Williams. If you buy the bottled and bond, you can't go wrong.
So I think this is leading from like mixing to mixers.
Agree. No, I had a Manhattan last night for the first time in a while. My father-in-law likes to pre-mix his Manhattans, and then he keeps it in the freezer in an old Jim Beam bottle. And then when he wants a Manhattan, he just pours one out. And so that's what he gave me for Christmas, was a bottle of his pre-mixed Manhattan. It was pretty good. We are so far off topic right
now. Leave it to Matt to
hey, you brought up bourbon.
Keep us on the middle of the road here.
Keep it on the mid. We're trying to keep it on the
mids.
Or see strained to the sides.
Listen, I'm pulling everything I can out here to try and get this back on the tracks. Tracks,
On the tracks. Missed my mid-side joke.
Mids, tracks.
So have you been? The project I've been working on this week is I'm working on a mix for our friend Allison. It's a cello instrumental that we've added some rock drums to. It's very cool. It's very
Yeah.
interesting. I did apply a plugin that does mid-side processing and gave the cellos some more spread. That's the BrainWorks BX digital EQ, which is basically made to do mid-side. And it's the coolest thing about it is that anytime you touch one of the parameters, it solos that parameter temporarily so that you can hear exactly what it's doing in that space. And then as soon as you stop touching it, it goes back to the full mix. It's pretty neat.
Oh, cool. Yeah, something about mid-side processing is that I have dumped all of my stereo imaging plugins in favor of
Really?
achieving stereo image via mid-side processing.
Well, that's impressive to hear.
Yeah, I don't like them, and I really like the image subtleties that come from the mid-side processing. I think are always more desirable than the digital artifacting and things like that that tend to occur with the with the digital stereo image plugins.
Now let me ask you this, because since it sounds like you obviously working in it a lot more than I do, I tend to think of mid-side processing as kind of, and then maybe this is the wrong way to conceptualize it, is kind of having a crossover point, the way that you do when you add a subwoofer, and you have to think about where your crossover point is, where your subwoofer enters, your EQ range, and where that point matches the rest of your EQ curve. You kind of have to worry that there's something lost in that space where they cross over. And that can even happen with your regular monitors. There's a crossover point. But I'm curious, is there such a thing as kind of like a crossover point where you feel like you're missing, say, some mid-range information because you've EQ'd something differently in the sides and the mid channel?
Oh, I don't think so, because what I think in most simple terms, we're talking about how things are panned, and they're either going to be a no panning, so they're directly up the middle, or they're going to be combined into some percentage of panning of left and right, which means that the information exists both in the mid and the sides.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
And that's not to say that, unless you did something like specifically, like you said, okay, I'm going to, which I've never done anything like this, but I guess you could figure out a way, is I'm going to take everything below 250 and I'm going to send it to the mids off of this, this bass track, but anything 250 and above where you're actually splitting frequencies, and I'm going to send that to the sides. I've never done anything like that, but
okay.
I think that would be the only time where you would be like having the chance to lose some frequencies through your EQ cuts or something like that, when you actually divide up a signal. But when you're sending out the signal unaffected that way, unprocessed that way, you're getting 30% panning or something like that. So you've got the information exists in both places. So if you EQ it out of one place, it's still there, and that's going to be a matter of what your taste is. You haven't lost anything. It just may not be in the image where you want it. And that may also relate to, well, it's in my left and right channels, which don't handle as much bass up as my center channel does, which might, be sub or something like that. If you're running like a 2.1 system or something like that. And so, which I usually am.
You are usually you.
Yeah.
2.1.
And, but but when I still intend to hear bass, and my mains still reproduce bass low. And so I can hear if something has gone away or something like that. But I think that you're not really at risk of losing something unless you have done something intentionally to divide up the signal of your source
Yeah.
to where it's going in the mid or side. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. I think maybe I've been misconceptualizing it that way.
yeah, just the whole signal's going if you're not fully panned, but you're a percentage of panning, the whole signal's going both to the mids and the sides.
Right.
But at different levels. And so if you're 30% panned left, then you've got 70% up the middle and 30% on the left of one side of a channel if it's a stereo track, and you're doing 30 right, so you're still have all the source audio information in both channels. So
yeah, that makes sense.
So
I had another question. I totally forgot what it was gonna be. It was related to that, and but you still sum down to mono to check what it sounds like a mono, even if you're processing mid-side, right?
yeah, I do
that.
Yeah, I do that still, and I just do a quick mono check. So I don't actually do like a sum or bounce to mono or anything like that.
But, I don't do that either.
But yeah, I just have a mono button on my monitor controller that I use, or I can use the mono button in my DAW.
Yeah, I leave a plugin on my 2-bus set to mono, and I leave it, I leave it off until I want to do a mono check. Do you find, and maybe you don't remember, but do you find that with mid-side processing, you are less likely to get to have the phase problems that you get when you work in stereo sometimes, in terms of phase cancellation and in terms of mono compatibility? Do you find that working mid-side makes it a better like mono compatibility than working stereo?
I think in comparison to stereo imaging plugins, yeah.
I do feel like stereo imaging plugins is where you can easily and without knowing it run into trouble with
I don't know that
phase.
I don't know that there's a difference between just mastering stereo versus working mid-side, in the master. I really don't know that there's a difference related to issues with phase and things like that, that I've experienced anyway. No, it's once I kind of got the feel for kind of working in MS, then it just became better and better. It's something that I really enjoy doing. Actually, I just like it because there's so much. I don't know. You get some immediate gratification, from that. I always find that there's, I get some kind of improvement that I was looking to get, working with it that way. So it's always like I'm getting what I had hoped to achieve with the stereo plugin originally that I never really got. And, where I'm getting that subtle image, but I have the control of what's actually going on, because creating a stereo image it's basically done by creating a difference. Okay. Right. That's really all it is. It's really simple. Okay. So where are you on your sides versus your mid? What does your mid need? Work with them independently. I always start with them the same. That's why I always start with the stereo, with stereo processing before I do mids, because then I have them the same, and then I do them independently. And that just, and whatever, it's not like, okay, I'm gonna bump up the bass and this and that to get a difference. It's not like that at all. I get them the same to where it sounds good to my ear, and then I go in and I cue them independently, and then I keep them independent from that point on. And then the stereo image just sort of kind of blooms out of that. And so it's not really an intentional move to increase the stereo image. It's an organic thing that occurs as a result of working mid-side independently, because you're creating differences.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that the next time I master something.
When you do the process on EQ and compression and you do that. And the idea is to do it in a few different layers. Don't try to
Sure.
do it all at once. And that sum of differences that you get through your entire signal chain is what you end up with. What I think, if done well, a really nice stereo image that occurs organically out of it without having to do any digital processing to achieve it.
Yeah, I like that. I'm gonna the next time I master something, I'm gonna work on focus on the mid-side and see if I can get a different result that way.
Just start with, I suggest starting with EQ, because it's easier to hear than compression.
Sure.
And get an ear for it first of what's going on, and then once you feel comfortable working with it with a with an equalizer, then start trying to add in your mid-side in your chain with your compression. And play with that.
Compression can be harder to hear. The results of compression can be harder to hear in general. So yeah, definitely good advice.
And it may be because you really need to be thinking, well, why am I going to mid-side in compression? And you might be like, I really want to tame something. There's something specific about what's up the middle versus on the sides. And
right.
So it depends on the track and what the track needs. If call something out. What kind of transient is bothering you? Or because you don't really want to maybe you need some compression on the bass to fill it up or something like that, but you're probably not dealing with bad transients down low unless it's well, no, you're probably not, because even if you got a really strong click on the kick drum or something like that, you're going to be dealing
higher. 4,000, 8,000.
So there's a difference right there that between the mids and sides, where you might be really working that the mids and uppers for that click and for the higher end of the bass register or something like that, versus not even touching that in the mids.
Right.
So the differences just happen, but that's why I like to do both sides and do stereo first and then work out from there. And when you isolate, then it makes it easy, because it just kind of happens. You end up with differences from side to side, because you're working with them independently, and then your stereo image just sort of happens. And you can certainly go for creating differences intentionally to thinking in stereo image, but I don't really ever do it that way, because it's kind of counterintuitive to trying to improve the audio, the sound of the audio. If I'm EQing for the sake of let's get a stereo image, then I haven't really done that for what I think is a good reason, So, and it's not very often that the EQs ends up the same on side to side. So there's always some kind of difference.
Right.
It may be subtle. But.
That's an interesting distinction, because again, I haven't thought of it that way. So what you're saying is you don't go in going, okay, I'm going to use mid-side processing to make this sound wider, but you use mid-side processing to make it sound better. And as a result, it generally, because of the way it affects audio, makes it sound wider. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And it usually doesn't all happen in a single stage of your chain. It's kind of stacking that really brings that for the stereo image. So if you don't worry about focusing on stereo image and just worry about EQing your signal, and and then do that in mid-side and do it in several steps of stacked, and that could be all analog, that could be digital analog, it could be all digital, but in a series of stacked processing steps in your chain, then you will end up with a wider stereo image in the end. It's inevitable. So
yeah, I feel like I want to do some experimentation now on mid-side versus dual mono and see how that changes the way it's perceived in stereo.
Yeah. But hey, I have to call it a day. I don't mean to call it, but I was running behind, and then I've got a hard stop here. So And so if you don't mind, you
No, I
can
don't mind
carry
at
on
all.
though, if you want
I
to keep
think
going.
I think that we covered our bases here,
Okay.
from the size to the mid and back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm good.
Okay. Right on. Yeah. Because I gotta, well, I literally,
Well,
I have a meeting in 9 minutes. So
okay. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy
yeah, thanks. You
your
too.
Super Bowl, and
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
thanks, listeners. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out.
Yeah.
And thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah. I hope you got something out of that, and definitely hit, either one of us up for questions or comments or ideas or whatever the
Or
case.
let
So,
us know what you're doing, and
yeah.
start a discussion about how you use MidSide Processing, or whether you've used it at all.
Yeah. I mean, we could, MidSide Processing sucks, so
Yeah, I'd like to hear that. Let's dive into that. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway,
All
have a
right.
great day. Thanks for listening.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. See you later.